So part of living an empowering life, I think anyways, is the relationships that you have and the ones that you choose to engage with. What do you think?
I agree with you. I think human beings are inherently social creatures. I'm a huge history buff, nerd buff. And so I love watching archaeology shows. And so if you look at, archaeological findings, like dating back tens of thousands of years, like humans have traveled, hunted, and thrived in like social groups. So I think, just even speaking today, just like looking at the specific relationships that we hold and the support that each of those relationships do to nurture us, I think is important.
I 100% agree. I think that nurturing of us and really seeing there's so many different things that a human being needs, right? And so like when you're a little baby, you get all the things that you need from hopefully your caregivers. Hopefully,
you're giving them a lot of credit here.
Hopefully, if you've made it to adulthood, they at least fed you and gave you enough, shelter for you to survive. So I'm talking like bare minimum, right?
Well, I mean, for me, I'm just even thinking like the pandemic. I think the pandemic has left a lot of people feeling isolated. So that need of feeling socially connected and supported by other people, I think, is probably more important now than ever.
Yes. And so the social connections, right? I think there comes a point where you have to be more intentional with it, right? Because when you're in school, like you start making friends in school because, well, it's where you get thrown in. And so you're in all of these different social settings. And as you grow up, then it's, oh, okay, well, I'm going to have a romantic partner. And then you start, doing the nasty. And then you're just like,
hey, fucking can't take you anywhere.
You really can't. But I mean, part of it is that you start doing things that you're, okay, well, I can't do this with all of my friends.
Having sex? Yeah, no. I mean, I'm sure you could, but
you'd be a really good friend. I don't know. It reminds me of one of those memes I saw recently where it's like, do not call this number. Sherry is not up for a good time. That was a lie and an awkward conversation.
But I think you bring up a really excellent point that when we're younger, we don't have bills. We don't have jobs necessarily. I mean, you might to go through. I'm thinking like young childhood, where you get to spend a lot of your time and energy nurturing these friendships you have. I think as you get older, it's really hard to maintain and nurture those relationships, especially as you grow older and or, move out of state. How do you continue to either nurture those relationships or create new relationships that provide the support that you need? Because I think that as you go through school, if that's something you decide to do, or, you're pursuing a career, there's different levels of support that you need from your partner that's different than the support that I get from you as my best friend and only friend. And
that's right.
But you know what I mean? So it's like, I think it's so important as adults to feel empowered or feel that they have the tools to basically identify the needs of or support or social support that they need.
Well, when you were talking earlier about, how we came up as human beings, right? There were so many needs that people had that you would get them from the group. You weren't getting all of these things from your one and only true love, the one, your soulmate. Like there's so much pressure on that person to be all of your things. And they can't be all of your things. It's super unrealistic, and it is actually setting people up to fail when you have one person be all the things for you.
Well, when you're talking about them not being able to meet all the needs, that's absolutely true because, as you know, I have the different types of social support that people often look for.
What are they?
Okay, so the first one, emotional. This is the type of support that often includes physical contact, i.e., like hugs, pats on the back, as well as listening and empathizing. The second type of social support is esteem support. So this is the type of support often shown in expressions of confidence, affirmation, or encouragement, often pointing out the strengths that you possess. So you often see these in life coaches, Cydia, and or your therapist. The third type of social support is informational. This type of support comes in the form of advice giving or in gathering and sharing of information to help people know what the next potential steps are. The fourth and final one is tangible. And so this includes taking responsibilities for someone else so that they can deal with a problem or help someone manage a problem that they're experiencing. So like, for example, if someone's sick and you decide, hey, can I bring you some soup or something? Or maybe they're struggling with a certain problem at work, and so you decide to help them brainstorm some solutions. That would be considered tangible support. So, City, out of those 4 types of social support, is there one that you gravitate towards most, or?
Well, I would say with those, it's really interesting because as I reflect back on my very short life, because I'm only
You're
38,
so young.
I'm so young.
So young.
As I reflect back over this very short period of time that I've been on this planet, it's really interesting because there comes certain times where I did not feel like I had different types of support, where, you know, maybe I was good in the informational area because I've been pretty good at nurturing and seeking out mentorship relationships, right? Like that's kind of what came to mind with that. Tangible support, yeah, mostly I've gotten the things that I've needed in most of my jobs. I don't think I've ever been like, I didn't have, you know, this to succeed in my work. Like I don't think that's ever been a thing, but really it's been this esteem support and emotional. And after I graduated law school and started practicing law, there was a period of time where the only person I felt like I had in my corner was Matt. And it's really interesting because that happened right before I met the squad. And it was...
You're welcome.
Yes. And so, but it was this period of time where I just felt like I didn't have that emotional support. Like, yeah, I was in a book club, which is still the same book club that we're in now, but everybody was busy with their careers developing and being at the beginning of their careers, and the emotional relationships that I'd made in law school, well, they'd kind of dispersed. They were working in different industries. They were working on the different side of the law than maybe I was. They moved away. Definitely that one hurt a lot when one of my friends moved back to California, but needed to do what you needed to do, right? And so I really felt like, man, I have no friends. And Matt would be like, no, you have friends. I was like, no, I don't have friends. Like, I don't feel like I've got somebody who I could call up and be like, hey, you know, I'm getting off early today, or it was a really shitty day. You want to have happy hour? Like, you know, Matt is not the person that you take to happy hour. He's just not that person.
No,
I mean, he would go with me maybe and like eat some chips, but he's not going to sit there and just watch me get drunk. Like,
it's like half the fun.
That is half the fun, but like lacking that emotional support and just being like, man, like I don't have this, was something that was at the forefront of my mind when I'd met you and Jen, you know, particularly. And it was interesting because at the same time, I was in the need to buy bras, which, you know, women have to do from time to time. We have to go
over the shoulder, boulder holder is what I've heard the term called.
But what was funny about it was I was like, well, you know, I'll go bra shopping. I was like, well, I guess, like, honey, are you going with me? And so when we started kind of talking, and it was like, oh my gosh, you know, Melissa talked to me. Like, there's somebody at the gym that I'm, you know, having some sort of engagement with. Matt's idea was, hey, why don't you see if she wants to go bra shopping? And I was like, okay.
Is that like a weird first thing? Like, that was our first outing together.
It was our weird first friend date.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that those were the two that you gravitated towards, because I actually felt that informational support and tangible support were more in alignment. And I think that's because it is solution focused, or you're helping that person like think of potential steps, or you're giving them advice. But as I was kind of piecing together, you know, or looking over these types of emotional support, it kind of reminded me of like the love languages, you know, that we basically show love the way that we would like to receive love, whether we know that or not. And I think that that's the same with the type of social support. Like for me, I gravitate more towards the informational and the tangible, because that is how I usually will provide support. Not to say that I can't provide emotional support or esteem support, but that is typically what I give.
So when you're saying that you gravitate towards it, are you talking more about it isn't something that you try to give, or something that you seek out?
It's, I think, a little bit of both. I don't know. I think that like you provide me with a lot of emotional support, which is really, really nice. But I think that
you're welcome.
But I think that that's also really tied to how I show love. I think that social support and love language are very, very similar, because I'm looking at this informational support, which is like advice giving or gathering or sharing of information. One of the things that I learned is that if you're offering the wrong type of support, it can actually have a detrimental effect. And so it's important to know what social support is needed in any situation. And so when I say that I've experienced this, like I learned this by trial and error. So my husband, I would often provide a lot of emotional support about his academic career. See how I like academic career. And so I thought I was providing support by sharing information that I thought he might like or find useful for him. But to him, the way that he interpreted it was that I wasn't providing any support at all, but rather he felt like I was critiquing him or didn't believe that he was capable of figuring it out on his own.
And I think that that's like a classic men and women type thing, right? It's like, I don't want you to solve my problem. I want you to listen to what a shitty day I had. Right. And so like Matt immediately goes into, well, you could do this, you could do that. And it's like, I know. And so one of the things that, we've talked about on this podcast is emotional consent, right? Sometimes it's like, hey, Melissa, I need to tell you what's going on in X. Like, do you have capacity to hold this emotional space? And I may not say it like that. It's usually like, can I have emotional consent? You're like, yes. Because we now
oftentimes know. Because that's, okay, so I like tea, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, gossip tea, not like actual herbal tea, because that shit tastes like water. But like by her calling me and being like, can I have emotional consent? I know some good shit's about to go down. So I will always say yes, no matter what I'm doing.
But it's really interesting because, Matt and I had a little scuffle. Like I love him, but we all go through shit, right? And so we weren't talking. You were my emotional support, right? And like it was nice. And so as we're still coming out of it, I think things are mostly back to normal. But I asked him, I was like, who do you complain about me to? And he's like, no one. I was like, that is not healthy. Like,
but he also says that, he wasn't in a scuffle. He'll probably tell you the scuffle was all in your head.
Probably just a little bit of gaslighting there, just a little bit. But so we're joking around about it. But it's like I have people who I can go to, right? And even then, there's this hierarchy. So I had a conversation with a friend recently, and the conversation was, who do you go to first for if Matt were sick? I was like, well, I'd probably call his folks first. He's like, okay, after that, like, who do you call to be like, oh my God? It was like, well, it was you and the squad, right? Like those are the first people. And there's a hierarchy all the way down to like, who would be the last person on my phone that I would call for this kind of help. But it depends on the situation. Mm-hmm. The same friend, if I won an all expense paid trip to, Amsterdam to go to some electronic music festival, I'm sorry, boo, I love you, but I don't think this would be your trip.
No, that's a hard no.
That's a different friend, right? Like that's a different person. And I'm not that much into EDM, but like, whatever, I'm not going to say no. But like I have different people for different things, just like with shopping. Oh my God, shopping. I definitely have a friend who I can be like, I'm going to send this over here. And I know she will be the esteemed support, be my cheerleader, be like, yes, girl, buy the shoes, do it. Like totally like hype person, right? Like, who those people are. And if you are sitting there thinking to yourself, man, I don't have these people like I was, I felt like I didn't have any emotional support outside of Matt. And I had to do something about it. I had to put myself out there, I mean, that's not why I wore the leopard print bra that day where, we faithfully talked to one another.
I don't know. I kind of think that you had some intention behind it. You know what you were doing.
I knew what I was doing. I was luring them all in. But it was definitely something where I had to take that personal inventory and realize, hey, this is something that I'm lacking. And so, once I realized that was something that I had, and sometimes, I'll get through those different things, be like, man, like I really don't have this right now. Well, then it's up to you what you want to do with that information. For me, it was, I need to make some friends or rekindle these other friendships. And I've done that too, where I've gone back and tried to put more into some of these friendships. But when it feels one-sided, like, yeah, I don't want to be the person always, putting in all of the effort to keep that friendship
not
going.
Even just that. If you find that there's one person that always calls you because they're in a situation of crisis. I have this person. my husband's friend is often in a state of turmoil. You already know who it is. And so every time I get a text or a phone call from this friend, it's always me trying to be the caretaker, which if you've listened into previous episodes, that is I say family role, but it's really a set of characteristics that you display in any given situation, in any relationship.
This person, who shall remain nameless, is part of a dysfunctional family order that we have with this friend group.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, so every time I'm not getting anything out of that relationship. And though while I enjoy providing support where possible, at the same time, if that's all I'm doing and I'm not getting anything out of it in return, I have to cut that tie, because it's taking too much energy and I'm getting nothing back. So I think even as, if listeners, if you find that you are in a situation like that, where you are constantly being the one that's providing the support, but that support isn't reciprocated, it might be time to reevaluate that relationship, or maybe even having a conversation with that person and say, look, I really value you, and I find that I feel most connected to you when we're doing this. How can we find more ways to connect or support one another? But just like creating that dialogue. Or you might just, for me, honestly, with this person, I probably won't do it just because it doesn't seem of value to me.
It's not a relationship that makes or breaks you, kind of a thing. Because I think there are those kinds of relationships where you do have to do the things where you're having the difficult conversations, right? I mean, that's part of the whole conversations worth having project that you've been working on for the last year and a half or so, right? And just knowing, hey, on the other side of this hard conversation and vulnerability is going to be strength, but you have to be willing to put in that effort, even in your friendships. I think even more so in the friendships. And I was listening to a different podcast on this recently, and they were talking about, friendships, platonic friendships play such a huge role in our lives, and yet we don't celebrate them the same way that we do our romantic relationships or our familial relationships. It's like my relationship to you, the squad, and to the, other lifelong friendships that I've had, is way, way important and super significant for me. And I want to make sure that I'm keeping those and that I'm putting in that type of effort. But I don't think, I don't have a friend anniversary with you or with anybody.
I mean, we can set one up now. I mean, yes, let's celebrate us. Okay, but do you think, and this is, I know I told you that there was something that I came across when I was piecing together my show notes that really just fired me up, and I want to talk about it.
Okay, talk about it.
Briefly, do you think that gender in any way impacts social support?
I do think it does. And I think part of it is that men, going back to kind of the toxic masculinity and other things that we've discussed before, are encouraged not to have these relationships. So when I hear of men having deep bonds with other men where they're actually like putting in the work and the effort, I'm like,
what the fuck?
Mind blown. Like, really? Guys do that? Like, but I think it's so important that they do that, because
absolutely.
If we go back to, when we were separated by genders, hunter gatherers, and you go do the hunting thing, we're gonna do the gathering. You were in that support system with men or women, and there's something that happens in that space that I think is necessary to us as human beings.
Okay, as you're talking, I have no science behind to support this, but as you're talking, like, think about it. When you're gathering, so typically women were gatherers, and they actually, this is true, they actually held more weight in the tribe because, gathering nuts and berries, that was something that could be done year round, whereas meat was a very scarce resource. So if men were able to bring home meat, that was, amazing, but that wasn't the norm. But it just made me think that, when you're gathering nuts and berries, you can chat and, you can talk and you can build these social bonds with other women. However, if you're a male and you're out to go hunting, you often have to be quiet. So, the other animals that you're hunting, your prey, can't hear you. I'm wondering if that doesn't play some sort of role. Again, just spitting shit out as you were talking. I just found it very interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, let's relate that to sports, right? So you've got, while you're in the game, while you're focused to make the touchdown or score the goal, okay, I do know some of the things. While you're doing that stuff, everybody's super focused, but there's still celebration at the end. So even when they finally brought down that buffalo, there would be a celebration and all of them working together in tandem to bring home that bountiful meat to the women, right? So you have you do have that opportunity to have those bonds, and I think that that men as much as women need to have those, and that you do need to have that awareness that, hey, is this something that I'm missing? And even one of the things that I was thinking about as we were talking was women were not meant to raise children by themselves. They weren't. Like, for generations and generations, we have raised kids as a community. And then we hit suburbia. Then we hit the American dream, which is to go off and have your own land and have your own property and do all these things and do it all by yourself. Is there any wonder that the 1950s housewives were on all the drugs, uppers during the day to keep up with everything and downers at night so that they could get some sleep?
My dream. It's my dream right there. But I don't want to, okay, listeners, I don't think that I forgot about this study that I mentioned that really got underneath my skin. Okay, so this actually was a study looking into the social support in marriages. And so 235 newlyweds participated in the study, and findings showed that both partners were happier if the husband got the type of social support he needed most, while for women, it was enough that the husband even tried to offer support, even if it wasn't the right kind. And so as I'm reading this study, it really saddened me and angered me at the same time that this was just accepted. Why is it okay for women just to be like, well, he tried, that's enough. Okay, but you're still not getting fulfilled. You're still not, you're being left unsatisfied, emotionally, because you're not getting that social support that you need. And it's like, how can we start to change that?
So it was, it's okay. He's trying. At least he tried, like, what, to load the dishwasher?
No, that tried to offer support, even if it wasn't the right kind. So how we talked about those 4 different kinds of support systems that we need.
So if he tried to offer emotional support, you'd be like, yeah, that's okay. And
according to the study, that for women, it was just enough that they even tried, even if it was the wrong kind. How does that sit with you?
I think it goes back to, well, at least he tried, and we can talk about it at the book club. We can talk about it at happy hour. You're not going to believe what this guy did. I mean, he tried doing the laundry, but he shrunk my favorite shirt. Shout out to Vince. There's certain things where, the effort might mean something. But why did it get under your skin?
Well, because the reason why it got underneath my skin was actually another thing that Vince and I had worked through in counseling, because, he didn't know what type of support to provide me. So he ended up providing me little to none. Right. And so I think you had heard when I would, lovingly complain. I say lovingly because Vince is listening. Lovingly complain that I didn't feel supported. And I'm like, well, if I'm going through this marriage by myself, I might as well just be by myself. I mean, that's how alone or unsupported I felt. So even if you're trying, and, now he'll say, now that we've gone to counseling and we've established that line of communication, he's like, I just didn't know how to show you I loved you. I didn't know how to show you that, I supported you and how to encourage you. So I think that, that's, I know these are newlyweds, so what do they know? They're new. They like each other still, right? But talk to me in like 10, 15 years when you're
like, I want to see the people that have been through it all,
right?
That are spreading STDs at the nursing home.
Because I can guarantee you that while, the women in the study thought it was enough, I guarantee you that won't sustain them. And at some point, that is going to cause such a huge crack in their relationship, their marriage, that it's going to either lead to divorce or some serious marital discord.
And I can see that. And so even with that though, right? Like, this is one relationship, right? This is your romantic partner life, whatever you want to call it, right? If that's one relationship. What about all the other relationships around you? What about those friends? Like, part of what you mentioned right now is like counseling helped you. Would you go to counseling with a friend?
I absolutely would, especially if that friend meant a lot to me. Like I mentioned that friend earlier, that person I would not go with. But I think that if it was like a friend that I held really dear, like I have, friends from like high school, middle school that we've just lost touch, and I would love to be able to reconnect. But I think that if there's any sort of discord or, disruption, I would be open to having that with friends, because I don't think counseling should only be limited to just couples. I know that some people go to family counseling where the parents are involved, but why not family, or why not friends?
And that would be really interesting. I would love to see our friend group in a counseling session, just to be like, this bitch, she's always late. I'm like, yeah, okay, what's new?
I've just learned. I'm just happy enough if you show up.
Hey, I tagged you on something earlier that's like, you'll win $1 million if your friend is late. Who are you asking to show up? It's like, I got you. I volunteer as tribute. You can totally tag me on that. But like, it's an interesting, because it's actually a new area of development in psychology, is this friend therapy. And so I actually had a chance to listen to a friend therapy session on this other podcast with Esther Perel, who is like the relationship guru. She knows all of the things, and it's just really interesting because it is something that, even though these relationships are so important to us, we may not have the tools, or we may not think that the tools that are available can be used in these different settings. And so I would love to see people doing that. Like, if this really means a lot to you, go out on that limb and say, you know what, this really means a lot, and we need to bring in a third party to help us have this conversation, or get over this hurdle, get over the fact that you don't call me enough, or because there's pain there. There's something that's not being met. Which one of these things isn't being met, right? Like, can you point to, I'm not feeling my emotional
needs are being met
right here, or you're the only person who I trust because you know my background. Maybe I don't feel like you're in the cheerleader place where I would like you to be. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, you know what? I felt really unsupported when I posted that thing, and it took you 30 minutes to like it, Melissa. That kind of thing.
I can't keep up. But I think, okay, so, I mean, I know like friend therapy might seem a little extreme. So it's like, okay, when we're looking about empowerment and taking control of our lives, like, if you don't feel the need or feel like you want to maybe ask your friend, because maybe they're just not going to be receptive to it, it could just be that you need to take it by the reins, because, my husband wasn't necessarily providing me with the support I needed. So then why not tell them what you need? So, I think oftentimes people think, well, if like my partner, friend, spouse really knows me, he or she will know that I'm upset and they'll know how to help me. Well, you know what? I hate to tell it, break your bubble, but like, people aren't mind readers, right? And you need to ask people what support they need in that moment, or what support you need in that moment. And don't assume that you know. So I think that the same goes for yourself. You may need to ask, or, tell that person the specific type of support you need. Kind of like what you were mentioning, I'm not feeling like I'm getting that emotional support that I need right now. Like, be honest about it. Because I guarantee you, if that friend, partner really cares about you, which I'm assuming that they do, they'll be like, oh my God, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. How can I provide you that support in this moment? That's it for this episode. Find us on Instagram at Pivotal Moments HQ for all the behind the scenes and the sister-like banter you know and love. We want to thank our producer and music director, Ron Johnson. This has been an Astronomicus DMR and Pugs Productions podcast.